Greetings and welcome to the Progressive Christians podcast. We are the love your neighbor kind of Christians and not the storm the Capitol kind. So if you're curious about what a socially and politically progressive Christianity looks like, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Reverend Dr. Christopher Carter and I am your host. I am a professor of theology at Methodist Theological School in Ohio and the lead pastor of the Loft Faith Community in Westwood, Los Angeles, California, I should say. Westwood United Methodist Church in Los Angeles, California. We want to invite you to please rate, review, and do all that good stuff. If you're watching us on YouTube, please click like and subscribe. And whatever podcast platform you're using, but definitely, most definitely on YouTube. And tonight, I am joined by the entire crew. We are all here. We had to make some accommodations for me as I'm recording as you will see if you're watching on YouTube, in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. But I got an almond grove on one side of me, and a cornfield behind me. So I'm definitely
so agrarian.
It's so me.
You said tonight because it's late.
It is. We had to accommodate my vacation. It is. And we're going to do our best to make sure we maintain not having that explicit comment on there because we've had an interesting day. Today we're going to be talking about the public perception of Christianity, particularly among non-Christians. And this is really connected to South Park's portrayal of Jesus and the way they talked about Christianity in season premiere last week. Obviously, it was a huge deal because the way they talked about Donald Trump. We're going to get into that as well. And one of the question I think that really kind of frames this conversation, which is, I think, gonna make some of you laugh, and among most of you, Wesley, is Christianity losing its positive perception? I think that's a legitimate question.
What do you mean? Is it?
Well, I mean, because the data says so. There used to be a positive.
20 years past. I was just this question started getting asked.
2014. So that's 10 years. 10 years. We have. Yeah, I'll get into the data specifically, but it has significantly dropped in the last 10 years. This is recent, right? This is recent.
Yeah, I mean, that's unsurprising.
Well, I'm just saying.
What else happened 10 years ago?
No, we're going to get into that because they had a cartoon of him on South Park.
They sure did. AI for the win? I don't know.
All of him.
I think AI was for the win on that one. But I think too, and I want to be clear before we really get into the nuances and we do a couple of shout outs. I think it's worth considering, as I thought about this question and kind of set up the conversation for this episode, is I don't think it's as easy as to blame MAGA Christians or even a block of a certain kind of evangelical conservative Christian. I think I know, actually, I won't even say I think, I absolutely know it's more nuanced than that. So I really want to get into that tonight and talk about some solutions, because as someone who is a Christian, someone who cares about the way in which Christians are viewed in the world, specifically because, I consider myself someone that tries to walk in the line of Martin Luther King and Howard Thurman and activists such as that. How do we actually change the public perception so people actually think of us as people who, broadly speaking, do more good than harm? So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do that, I want to say a couple things, have a couple shout outs. First of all, I was looking at the data, as I tend to do at the end of every month. And what was crazy is so obviously the podcast is continuing to do well. Our YouTube subscribers is growing slowly, but that's okay. All the other Apple, Spotify numbers are phenomenal. What was shocking to me was that, so obviously the United States, we have the most podcast listeners, followed by Canada and the UK. But then number 3 was Hong Kong and Australia, and Norway, France, Honduras, and South Korea were like right after that. And they were all around the same number of subscribers. And I was just
Hello there.
I was
around
like,
the world, all of you.
That is awesome. I was like, I just, for some reason, it was like, I don't know why, for some reason, I decided to check this time.
Is it just bots listening to us?
I don't know. If you are from...
I'll take bots from Australia. That's cool. That's pretty...
I thought bots from Hong Kong, Norway, France.
Absolutely.
South Korea. I know, because Kyle, we have
Kyle's
someone
there.
from, so I'm like, okay, Kyle's probably spreading the good word.
Thank you, Kyle.
We love you,
but I'm not sure
Kyle.
who else. But yeah, I just thought that was amazing. We also want to give a shout out to, or Julia, do you want to take this one, the second one?
Lance. Hi, Lance. Lance is a listener, and he came to church on Sunday, and it was so good to meet you. I hope I didn't scare you off. It was, and no one was there. I was holding it down.
She absolutely was.
Please come back another Sunday.
Because
Please
we were
come back
all
again.
gone. Exactly.
Everyone has heard about you.
We were all on vacation doing our various vacation-y things. So that was great to see people that are local listening to us showing up to worship. And there was one review on iTunes that I wanted to read by Israel. I think the last name was Sandoval. And it just, to me, just was so powerful. And I will say, like, thank you for all of you who are leaving reviews. If you haven't left a review, please consider doing it, because it does encourage more people to listen to us. And I think, we really want to start building bridges to help people heal from, as we said a couple episodes ago, the complex PTSD of growing up in some of these conservative, spaces that have done harm to people. And so this is his review. He wrote, as someone who came up in the young, restless, and reform movement. So I have to pause here and ask y'all, had y'all heard of this movement?
No, what is it? Do we know?
I had not heard of it. I had not heard of it.
No, but it would remind me of.
This is the precursor historically to the Theo Bros.
Oh,
so terrifying.
This is the like a post Billy Graham, like height of like Hillsong, mega church, cool to be Christian. But then there was this like subset of that was these like very intellectual, buttoned up, polo wearing kind of like cool guys, smart guys. And so that was like the young, restless, and reformed.
Oh,
so there were like these different aspects of that, but it was like this youth movement that was like making Christianity cool again.
He continues, I was wholeheartedly bought into the idea that conservative political thought was the only correct ideology for a true Christian. The Reformed teachers I deeply respected heavily persuaded me that this was the biblical mandate for my faith and civic engagement. However, over the past several years, and especially during the first Trump term, I found myself increasingly vocal about issues of injustice, particularly concerning police brutality against Black people. This past political cycle, the hypocrisy I witnessed firsthand among quote unquote MAGA Christians and their blatant disregard for scripture became impossible to reconcile. After over 12 years, I made the difficult decision to leave my church, finding myself ideologically isolated and embarking on a season of deconstruction. In this challenging time of re-evaluating my core beliefs and seeking to rebuild my faith, the Progressive Christian Podcast has been an absolute godsend. This show provides invaluable guidance as I strive to reconstruct my understanding of Christianity around the actual person and teachings of Jesus and what it truly means to be a faithful follower in modern-day America. The hosts fearlessly confront issues that many within my former circles avoided or even championed, particularly the dangerous ideology of Christian nationalism. They expose it for the heresy and false gospel that it truly is, offering a refreshing and much-needed perspective rooted in compassion, justice, and the radical love of Christ. If you're also navigating similar season of deconstruction or simply seeking a more authentic and inclusive expression of faith, I cannot recommend this podcast enough. It's a vital resource for anyone wanting to align their faith with the heart of Jesus and oppose the harmful distortions of the gospel so prevalent today. Israel, when I first read your review, I literally shed a tear. I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, that is, I just felt so happy for you. Like, I was just like, wow, like that is as Reverend Blair would say, stages of faith, man. That's developmental growth, and that's super hard. And I can, I'm happy for you that you're in this season and you're working through it, but also to write such a kind, just beautiful review. Just thank you. I mean, honestly, just that's all I can say. Bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, and we're glad that we're glad we could help. Good job, everyone.
It's so affirming. Like, the people get it. What we're trying to do.
I know it's sometimes still wild, but it's exciting, and reviews like that definitely help us feel like we're not alone. And I think we all kind of need that right now, because as Wesley usually says, the world is on fire. So
I mean,
Well, and also Israel, like it says you're still in that deconstruction. And so if there's anything in particular we can help you with, please send us an email. Like if there's a topic you're struggling with or something that you're working to work out and you think, if you're thinking about it, other people in your phase are probably also thinking about it, and we would love to wrestle in that with you. So
yeah,
thanks
definitely.
for letting us know and continue to be in conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it's always affirming to hear from folks about how we're being helpful, because I think for the longest time, and even a little bit sometimes now, it still feels like we're yelling into the void. But in some ways, the void is talking back in a good way, and it's encouraging to know that people are listening and it's being helpful.
I actually think, and this is so there's a member of the loft who emailed me who said that they have now shifted, or because they would have identified as a MAGA adjacent Christian prior to their deconstruction many years ago. And this person said that their evangelism is to convert conservative Christians to at least moderate Christianity, if not progressive Christianity, which is just like, I would have never thought about that as a kind of evangelistic framework. But, Blair, that's kind of, I mean,
I'm like cracking this big smile. Do you want to read my section on evangelism ad intra versus evangelism ad extra?
I literally cannot wait to read your dissertation.
Drop the link.
I can nerd out at you if you want me to, but absolutely. Excited. Like there is the proclamation of the gospel and the truth of the good news of the liberation that is possible and the healing that is possible is as much needed inside the church as it is outside the church. So that's like one of the main misconceptions, is that evangelism is just from Christians to non-Christians. No, anywhere we need healing, that's where evangelism belongs. And the church needs
healing.
So much. So much.
That was great. No, thank you, Blair. So let's get into the primary topic in terms of the declining image of Christianity, and to kind of set a framework for our discussion. So we actually know where we're starting from, because apparently I live in this strange bubble of
time warp.
Yeah, but give us the data. I mean, data is always helpful.
I'm gonna give you the data. Gonna give you the data, because I'm like, it wasn't as bad as y'all thought it was, apparently. But I mean, I don't know. Whatever.
Sure.
Okay. So in 2025, so just a very recent Pew study that came out in, I think, February. So it was titled "Religion's Role in Public Life," this section, and it reveals a significant drop in public trust towards Christianity. So majorities agree with each of the 6 statements, but higher shares agree with the positive ones. So 80% of people polled agree that churches and other religious organizations bring people together and strengthen community bonds. 78% of people polled agree that they play an important role in helping the poor and needy. 64% agree that they protect and strengthen morality in society. However, smaller majorities agree with the negative statements. 59% of Americans agree that churches and other religious organizations are too concerned with money and power. 54% agree that they focus too much on rules, and 54% agree that they are too involved in politics. Now, what I thought was really interesting, and where I want to kind of take this conversation, is that the last study they did was in 2024, and compared to that study, Americans now express less positive views of churches and other religious organizations. The share of U.S. adults who express a very or somewhat positive view of religious institutions declined from 63% in 2014 to just 51% today. And I think that, to me, says a lot. And that's what I'm saying. Like, to me, you're talking about like a 12-13% drop. Like, that is statistically, that is huge, right? That is huge. And so that's, for me, this is where it's like, okay, I'm not losing my mind, right? It was not as bad at some point. Like, so for me, 2014, that's when I'm in my second appointment as a pastor. I've already been a senior pastor at Compton. Like, so yeah, this was during my early ministry, and this is a huge shift. So I just wanted to just get y'all's thoughts first on the data, just that part of the data right there.
I mean, if you asked me those questions, I would probably answer in the negative. I mean, like, I understand that my experience with church is very unusual. And like, of course, around the time of Donald Trump is when he's like directly attached to the evangelicals. Like the two things coincide intentionally. And of course now people feel so many of the terrible things that are happening are now happening in the name of Christianity. People should starve because that's what Jesus, like all these crazy things that people say, like what are people supposed to think, especially if they're not familiar with like the life and testament of Jesus Christ?
But I think it's also like, it's not as if 63% is such a good number in terms of a 2014 number of religious organizations that are supposed to be like, when we talk about the kind of communities you want to create, I would be hard pressed to believe that wanting people to have access to community, to food, to housing, to all the things that make it possible for you to thrive, that we would only get to 60% approval, 63% approval on that. So like, it's been a long history of evangelicals or Christianity, like their opposition to marriage equality. Like it's been this sort of like their opposition to abortion rights. Like all of these things have been constantly at the forefront of the conversation. And it's probably why also so many people think that they're too involved in politics, because they're but at least the way that they're currently involved, they're taking things away from people. And I think in my world, religious organizations that are holding true to their values are finding ways to give more to people.
I mean, I think that's such an excellent way to put it in terms of, I mean, if you just got the ministry of Jesus, I'm like, did he take anything away other than like disease and suffering? I think that's like hunger. Like he took away, like he fed people, he healed people. And there is this negative understanding of, or we say negative rights, right? From an ethical perspective of what they're trying to take away. Blair, I'm curious about just kind of what came from you when you were looking at these data.
I mean, I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised we even had 61% approval. Yeah, like
right.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah, I mean, because I study the world of evangelism, which is it's not singularly concerned with what do non-Christians think about Christians, but it is like very frequently concerned with what non-Christians think about Christians and what are the barriers to relationships between Christians and non-Christians. And so this stuff is like bread and butter. And so we've talked about Robert P. Jones on this podcast before, but I'll point to his 2016 book, The End of White Christian America, which basically is it's like the post-election autopsy of it was published in 2016 before the election. And there is a version where he has a new like epilogue that breaks down what he thinks happened. But it basically lays out that as white evangelical participation in politics grew and white Protestant mainline participation in politics decreased, and just general religious affiliation has continued to rise, it was basically like because of the splintering between white Protestant mainliners who were accepting and supporting progressive values and white evangelicals who were tying themselves so deeply into this religious conservative, religious right movement, that basically it split the church. And so it not only harmed the church, but then it created this massive negative connotation for those outside of the church. And it became harder and harder to understand what Christianity was in the United States. And so a full quarter of Americans are now religiously unaffiliated.
I think to me, that's the most obvious way to read the data in terms of looking at how many people are now religiously unaffiliated. And that's where you find the large chunk of people who have negative views on church, right? So you wonder how many of those people either grew up in church and left church and they're carrying those views with them. How many of them come from parents who left church and have trauma and implanted, don't go to, those kinds of things. I do think it is more about reaping what we've sown. And I think that is palpable, as you said, Blair. Like, what happens when there's this shift into politics, and it's done in such a way where you're taking away things people actually, broadly speaking, agree with, wanted, like, and the majority of Americans actually want. And so this is coming back to change or to continue to increase the negative perception. I think for me, what I saw on South Park, while I absolutely loved it, because to me, I'm like, okay, like this is the genesis of this episode. I'm watching South Park because Julia, I think, did you put it in the group chat first?
I sure did, because I woke up. My friend in the UK was like, "Did you watch it?" And I was like 6 a.m. I was like, "Why not right now?" And then I immediately was like, "Y'all need to watch it."
It was good and crazy at the same. I would just say, like, it was wild.
It's really funny.
Somebody needs to summarize it.
Well, so basically,
spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't.
Oh yeah. Spoiler alert. So if you haven't watched it,
even the most particular description of it would not do justice.
Probably.
Yeah, you got to watch it.
To the beauty of that creation.
Basically, Cartman wakes up one morning and he turns on his favorite
I'm
program.
like laughing already.
His favorite radio program, which to him is comedy. It's NPR and it's gone. And he's like, "Wait, where's my favorite program? It's so funny." And he starts listing off all of these horrifying things that aren't funny. And he's like, "It was hilarious. What happened?" And his mom was like, "The president took it away." And he's like, "What?" And the president we all know who the president is. Another very funny moment is that you go to see the president in the White House. He's having like a party. It's like a pool party with like,
I mean,
it's like Mar-a-Lago, but at the White House.
Basically. Like people from Florida, they got like American flag bikinis on.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the White House is getting more and more gold. Like they're
it's so
pictures,
embarrassing.
even just over the last year, they're like gilding more and more of the White House.
And I love like a golden gilded gaudy, but basically he climbs into bed with Satan. Like it's
and Satan's the same character he's always been.
But also the thing is too, what's wild is the way in which, his press secretary is still there with her cross on that she wears all the time. She talks about how Christians are upset. Like there are ways in which you see the obvious leaning into saying Christian things and claiming Christian values by getting into bed with Satan, right? Like having a pool party where he's all up on these different women and stuff like that. And like, I mean, it's like, it is a direct call out of Trump.
It's also funny that Satan wants nothing to do with him.
Yeah, that
which is like okay.
I mean, with Satan's like
Satan feels the same way Melania does.
Ouch.
Satan, and then Satan is compared him to, I don't know if you saw the South Park movie, because Satan's so Satan was before Satan's previous boyfriend was Saddam Hussein, and so that's who he's comparing him to. She's like, "You remind me of my ex," and blah blah blah, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is wild." So that's what happens. That sets the tone for everything. That's the gist, and then they get to school, and the principal, who is known as PC principal, changes, and instead of being like PC with respect to like,
politically correct,
he becomes pro-Christian principal, and he's like, legit evangelical, like mega pastor, like, like super bro into just like saying we're going to be lean in hard to Christianity and prayer in schools. And Jesus comes down and goes into the school, and he's like, we're going to be, doing all this stuff, but Jesus is going to be here. White Jesus is everywhere.
To South Park in Colorado and hangs out at school. And then the parents get mad because
Jesus is being forced on the kids.
But it's like literal Jesus. Like he's like walking around. He's like floating around in their school. Jesus
gets mad because the Jewish kid doesn't want to sit next to him. And he didn't anyone sit next to him. He's just like, oh, it's because there wasn't any space at the table. So it was really emphasizing the ways in which they're trying to push religion in schools. Because I think the principal is like, oh, every place is going to have a Bible in the class. Like it's all the stuff that's happening in Oklahoma is what they did in South Park. But the part that to me that was the deep critique of Christianity was the end of the episode when Jesus is giving them the Eucharist, giving them bread. It's the beginning of the Eucharist, and he does it so that they're eating, and he can actually just whisper through his teeth that he has to go to school and do all these other things because Donald Trump is both the president who can, what is he? I think he said he can take bribes and send people to jail or something like that. I think is basically what he says. And so he can do anything he wants. And he's like, do you want to end up like Stephen Colbert and canceled? And just even the 60 Minutes clip that they're doing, they're like, they're all hedging their bets when they say anything that's critical of the president. And so it's portraying Christianity, obviously, in this very transactional way that has just no authenticity. That's very much about kind of being at the whims of these people in power. It doesn't really have any substance.
It's part of the grift.
It is part of the grift. That's a great way to put it, Julia. They're portraying Christianity as part of the grift. And I just thought, yeah, it was really good, and its critique,
and it was eerily accurate,
and it hurt. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I know that I talk about. I'm like, man, this sucks. That's all I kept thinking. I'm like, this is true, and it hurts.
It's embarrassing.
It is that's a good way to put it. It's embarrassing.
Wesley doesn't tell anyone he's a Christian.
That makes it sound like I hide it or something.
He doesn't hide it. This is why he refuses the moniker. He doesn't want to be known. He doesn't want to be associated.
I don't. Like, okay, I mean, the Christianity got a whole South Park episode, and you want to claw it back? Yeah, it's someone's work.
And the majority of white Christians in Protestant mainline parishes across the United States, they're also embarrassed to tell people that they're Christian. You are not alone in this, Wesley.
You're in good company. I also think it's embarrassing. So
I think this is where, obviously I'm not, but again, that's what I do. It's what I study. I don't have an issue talking about it, but I think to me, this is where I think the intervention needs to happen. I think in as much as this episode is an accurate portrayal where the person who is most critical of Trump is the devil, right? The person who's actually resisted to Trump is the devil's like, nah, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Like, that says a lot. Right? That says a lot.
Well, and it was like the very end of the episode. I did not watch the whole episode. I just watched the very last clip that was like the AI, the thing that got everybody riled up because it's this AI image of Donald Trump walking through the wilderness and his penis has a conversation with him. And
it's a play on that. What is it? He gets us.
It's a play on this marketing campaign that has been put together by evangelical Christians. Millions of dollars. Millions of
when you put it on the Super Bowl
commercials, all sorts of things. You see, I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I get that in my like marketing, in all of my social media and everything is like all he gets us. And it's this whole campaign that was created to try to fix the image of Jesus among Americans. And it was just brilliant how South Park was like, oh no, actually he gets us it's just a facade for this same kind of broken, grifting Christianity. And so the website they created was hetrumpedus.com. Yeah. Because that's what it was. It was a grift. And I just so appreciated, I just really appreciated like that very pointed critique. And I guess maybe if folks aren't paying attention to Christian marketing, they might not have noticed, but I just thought it was brilliant.
I mean, I think this is where art is going to be helpful for us over the next few years to really be able to speak and say things that other people are afraid to say, in ways that, I mean, clearly, look at what's happening. We know, we are aware that Gaza and what's happening there is devastating, and we want to dedicate at least an episode to it. We will do that, but people aren't discussing it. Like, it's still not discussed. Like, people talked more about Colbert's cancellation than they talked about like the genocide and the famine, right?
Part of the grift is always the distraction, like the ability. People don't want to look, and we are in general conditioned not to look, right? We step over unhoused people every day. Like, yes, it's cruel. It's also so overwhelming that it's like necessary in a way to like, capitalism keeps the rent is still due, and it makes it like easy to excuse it and ignore it because people don't want to look at it because it's disturbing and upsetting.
I mean, I'm gonna talk about this on Sunday. I think the beginning of deconstruction, decolonization. Actually, Blair, this is like I'm actually calling it. I actually feel like now deconstruction in and of itself is not a useful term because it's been so weaponized by conservatives and evangelicals and people who are against growth. It's really, you're talking about spiritual growth. You're talking about spiritual formation. That's the deconstruction. It's a stage in a process that everyone should be going through. And we make it sound like that's a destination when it's actually the beginning. Like it's the beginning of developing self-awareness. It's the beginning of where you're going to be going. And so I think that for me was essential, I think, in learning in that episode. And I think that's what that happens because of vulnerability. I believe that happens. It begins to happen because you start seeing the world beyond your own selfishness and your own ego and your own self and desires, and begin to experience the world through the eyes of other people, to begin to be in solidarity with other people, and ask yourself how your religion and how your beliefs actually impact them, and what does it say about you as a person. And vulnerability is it is essential. It's definitely one of my takeaways from my trip to South Africa. But and what happens, as Julie described, in our current economic system, the way our country is set up is to help us, to force us to be numb, so we don't have time to feel. Because when you feel what's actually happening, it can be overwhelming, right? When you actually take the time to feel and see and witness, you're like, we have to change because what we are witnessing is insane, right? And so, yeah, the distraction is a part of it, but we have, to me, this is where I think like Christianity can make a positive intervention. I want to jump to the end, but I'm like, this is where we actually can be like, oh, these people are doing some good stuff because they're helping us actually, be prophetic and uncover some of these harms and some of these destructive tendencies that are within the body politic that we actually need to root out. So at any rate, I'm curious, before we move on, are there any other, well, if there's anything else you want to say about South Park, I guess maybe I should start there before I go on that. Is there anything else you want to say about that episode and about what he said about Trump or about how they portray Christianity? Because again, to me, I thought it encapsulated that increasing negative view, the increasing, basically the statistics basically say the same thing Jesus said. They're like, people are too concerned about money and politics. Jesus was like, you're making money an idol all the time. All the prophets, Jesus were like idols. You're making this stuff an idol. Moses, you should have no other gods before me. Basically saying you cannot have any other idols. I mean, it's all about idolatry. What do you worship? And all these people worship things that are not God. Fundamentally, they worship
it
or
also,
status or whatever,
and power.
It also, like, one of the things that I think is difficult about the way that the negative perspective that people have about Christianity is like conservative Christians cling to the belief that they are constantly being persecuted. And so when you see this data, then that reaffirms them that they are the ones that are being harmed.
Can I throw some more data in here? Is that okay? So there's also a PRI poll from last year, from 2024, a report on the religiously unaffiliated. And there's a section in this report that talks about why people have become religiously unaffiliated. And 2/3 say it's because they stopped believing. Okay. But in 2016, 3 in 10, so 30% roughly, said they left their religion because of the treatment of gay and lesbian people. In 2023, that number rose to 47%. The percentage of religiously unaffiliated Americans who say they no longer identify with their childhood religion due to clergy sexual abuse scandals rose 10 percentage points from 2016 to 2023, going from 19% to 31%. So people are leaving because of very real harm. Like, the church didn't lose them, the church hurt them. I think that's really important to name.
Yeah.
When conservative Christians especially are trying to claim this persecution thing, it's like, no. You're not being persecuted. You're being held accountable. And that feels to you like persecution. But that's not what is happening.
Yeah. Accountability feels like persecution when you have been in a position of privilege and not been made to be held accountable. And when in truth, accountability is the first step towards liberation. Like literally, accountability is the first step towards liberation in the sense of like healing, wholeness, and reconciliation. None of that can happen if you don't hold yourself accountable first.
So one more data point that I think is important for responding to conservative Christians in this claim of persecution is that of the 67% of Americans who claim they are Christian, only 21% say they attend church services weekly. I'm sorry, 24% say they attend religious services weekly, and only 21% say they attend at least once or twice a month, which means of 67%, 45% say they go to church at all, which is leaving 15 to 20% of the population that says they're Christians not going to church ever. So if you're a Christian, you're not involved in a community at all. I'm curious to know how you're practicing your Christianity. And I would guess it's by claiming political affiliation and persecution and wearing a cross and thinking that is what makes you
a
like
cultural Christianity.
Yeah, like Christendom from like back in basically like, pre democracy. Like, we still had kings. Wesley.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that like the church continues to harm people. The Methodist Church just went through the split around homosexuality and the full inclusion of queer folks in communities, and it decided to separate. So it's not as if these issues that people point to have stopped. Even in Los Angeles, when I think about when I got here, the amount of churches I encountered that were queer friendly but ultimately not was rampant, and I don't think the landscape has changed very much. So if in a place like Los Angeles, just speaking specifically about the queer community's experience of Christianity, that harm continues to be perpetuated, I can't imagine what it's like in places that won't even acknowledge our humanity.
And Carter, when you refer to accountability, the thing is like, this isn't even accountability. Like, people leaving the church isn't even accountability.
Yeah,
That's
it's just a
people
poll.
leaving because people aren't being held accountable. Accountability isn't even happening, and they can't even handle that.
It's too much, Julia. It's too much.
I guess financial accountability. I don't know.
How dare we tell the truth? How dare you all tell the truth?
So we have actually done a really good job of naming how both conservative churches and mainline churches honestly have played a part in creating a negative view that people have of Christianity. There's one thing I want to say before we start discussing like what we can do to begin to change that perception, is specifically talk about the Black church. And this comes from my experience of doing some community organizing during the beginning of Black Lives Matter movement in San Diego, and the response that we got from so many Black young people who did not have anything to do with us clergy. And I was surprised. Again, I come from like Black Midwestern, politically active, because most of our church was like in labor unions. And like, I think in a lot of ways I conflated that kind of labor union activism with church activism. And I didn't really draw clear lines of distinction. And what I realized in San Diego was that these young people were so upset with the church's response, especially in the 90s, to the way they dealt with drugs, the way they dealt with gender sexuality, the way they dealt with single moms, and the blaming of them for their problems rather than trying to seek to help them, of saying, you need to essentially prove to white people that we're better, like the way in which, like the Kingian model, quite honestly,
respectability politics.
Yes, respectability politics, right? They're like, this has actually done more harm than good. You have sold out to corporations. You've sold out to these white Christians. You've lost your prophetic voice. This is not your movement. You will not co-opt this movement from us. And this was like, early, 30s. I'm like, I'm a pastor. This is like what I'm supposed to be doing. This is how I see myself. I'm like, wow, we have really screwed this up. Like it was a profound awakening for me that I was actively, I could not wear my clergy collar. That if I went into a space, because I was young, no one would assume I was a pastor. But when I first was starting to participate, I was wearing my clergy collar, and it was again, they were like, no, we don't want you involved. And it was helpful for me to, and kind of help me see the mistakes that my predecessors had made. Like really, I would agree, probably since Jesse Jackson. And you see some Black churches beginning to reconcile with what happened, particularly those that are in Ferguson and places like that, to begin to shift, to hold themselves accountable, right? To actually try to change the way they do politics and organizing. But it's been hard because I think they're still buying into a civil rights model that isn't relevant for us today as Black activists, particularly trying to fight white supremacy. And so for me, that was, I do want to put that out there because I know, that's one perspective I can bring and just say like, this isn't, while I will definitely say in the data shows gender sexuality and women's rights are the primary reasons. Predominantly, that's going to be more issues with conservative churches. There are other things that churches across the board have continued to do that we as Christians have continued to fail, right? And to hold ourselves accountable. So I am curious. I actually think we need to do a better job of we need to change our image. And by that, I mean, we need to do better. That's the only way you can change your image. You have to do better. And so I'm curious as to what thoughts y'all might have, ideas, suggest, like what do you think a progressive Christian response ought be to repairing our image? Like what comes up for you when you think about that?
I think it's very annoying that we have to really be thinking about branding. like how can we better brand?
I don't think it's branding though. I think it's doing stuff.
It is absolutely, because part of the problem is that conservative Christians have been thinking about branding and have been running a business, and it is about economics for them. We have to create an alternative option. But in order to create an alternative option, you have to, because they're branding, then you also have to brand. And it is very annoying to me that we honestly need to be like, okay, we need PR. Like progressive Christians need PR.
Yeah, except we tried that in the early 2000s and it didn't go very far.
What did we try in the early 2000s?
The Red Letter Christians and the...
I don't know.
I remember that.
What is that?
I remember
Evolving
that.
Faith Conference. God bless them. And like, it's not like there haven't been pushbacks or like strong Shane Claiborne. Like there were progressive Christian influencers who were trying to make the rounds in the early 2000s. But the real problem here is, one, it's, as Wesley said, it's ongoing harm. So it's very hard to build people's trust when there's ongoing harm. You can't confess if you haven't repented, and we can confess all we want, but if we haven't brought our siblings in to actually be repentant with us, then I don't know how much good our confession will do. It's that even once the harm has stopped, there's still trauma. And so we can't expect people to want to hear from us until we have modeled what it looks like to heal from trauma. And then also just like mentally, it takes 5 positive comments to overcome 1 criticism. So for every negative experience Americans or people around the world have with Christofascism and harmful Christianity, we're going to have to go 5-fold to overcome every single one of those experiences. And there is no campaign or media blitz in the world that can do that. Like the only way that's going to happen is through on the ground, intentional, hard, emotional relationship and community building. And I don't know that we're ever going to fully overcome the negative connotations associated with Christianity. And I don't know perhaps that we ever should, because I wouldn't ever want us to forget.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very fair critique in the sense that we always have to keep in the back of our mind some self-awareness of the mistakes we've made and the faults that we have. One of the things that I want to say real quick is that, to Wesley's point, because Wesley has mentioned multiple times, well, all of you mentioned about the harm that you've continued to do. One of the things that frustrates me, and I think that is important to actually to changing the relationships we have with communities on the ground, the people that we have harmed, but also the people that are still coming, people that are still there, that don't always enjoy what's happening, but they're still getting more positive than negative, is we need to ask ourselves why, as as progressive Christians. Like, and by that I mean, like, why was Jesus always with poor people? Why was Jesus with these prostitutes? Why was Jesus with those who were sick? Like, what put them in that condition? What made them outcasts? Why were they set aside? That Jesus felt like he needed to be among them, right? Because when you ask that question, like, what systems were put in place, what things were done that created the situation that put them in that position, the actual work you need to do, right, to get them to deliver the healing that we see modeled in the life of Christ. And so for me, it's the failure to ask the why, right? So if you look at the way in which we, for instance, have treated queer communities, like, you can say, well, are the way in which they have been set aside, castigated, and demonized, right, has put them in the position by which you would see someone like a Christ type figure be with that community who has been cast out, like, because of the ways in which we are treating them, right? So it's a fundamental failure to ask, I would argue, the right question. And I think asking ourselves the right kind of questions, to Blair's point, should make us more self-reflective. I do think it's about relationship building, and I also think it's about the kind of internal critique, and so that we actually name names and we say the things that we mean to say, and we hold ourselves accountable. And I know, and Julia and Wesley know, that this is something that, while I think I do a pretty good job of this, they hold me account to. Like they did today in our staff meeting. They're like, what are we going to do about this thing? And I think, you can get so wrapped up in, for me, planning all this other stuff, that you can forget that at its core, our jobs as Christians, as job people of faith, is to, uh, to begin to heal the world, like to literally see the world as our parish, as Wesley would say, and to begin to play a part in healing that. And I know, Wesley, you wanted to, I was talking about John Wesley, not this Wesley would say that.
You say John Wesley, I was like, I don't know that but I'll take it. What I was gonna say is, I think one of the ways that we get to repairing the image of Christianity is to begin to really address the material conditions of the communities we exist in. And so one of the things that I've thought about for a while is just, I start from the perspective that housing is a human right. And I think that should be something that people should not just have access to, should have, in order for them to survive. And one of the things that I would love to see churches that have some amount of land or some amount of wealth do is, build housing and make it non-market rate, like take it off the speculative market, so that it's truly affordable forever for anyone in the community. And so in that way, like, you're investing in your community, but it's a long-term reality where people are seeing Christians meet the needs of their neighbors directly and perpetually, not just in times of crisis, but just really committing to that. I think would go a long way. I mean, I think about the amount of wealth the Catholic Church has and how it stays somewhere, but not with the people. The United Methodist Church is a mainline denomination, and there are a lot of mainline denominations that are big and have the ability to do some of this. If maybe we thought less about surviving as individual churches or individual communities, and more about how do we make sure that our community is thriving, and trust that God will meet the needs of whatever it is that we have. So something along those lines, I think.
I mean, Wesley, I think that's critical, is having faith and having the trust, right, that we actually are going to have those needs met, right? So we're not concerned about speaking truth and about being in the community and doing the work, or because we're not afraid that someone would take away their money, which I know that still bothers people. And I do want to give a shout out, because Blair did put this in the internal chat. One of our colleagues, Reverend Victor Cyrus Franklin, who's a pastor at Holman United Methodist Church, but also was a pastor at Inglewood United Methodist Church, which is now a parish cooperative, I think. But they are doing affordable housing, and they've worked with the legislature in the state of California to make it easier for churches to do exactly what you're talking about. And I think California is its own ball of political challenges when it comes to housing. And so it's probably easier in some other states, but the work they're doing not only is going to benefit the community in Inglewood, but it's going to benefit other churches that want to do this, right? Like that, to me, that is like super powerful, impactful, groundbreaking stuff that they're doing. And so and again, these are the things that and so maybe when I talk about how do we repair the image, it's not going to be this grand, everybody's going to change. It's going to be a community at a time. It's going to be a community at a time, a relationship at a time, a person at a time. And it's over time, the same way that trust was lost. There's an expression that one of my coaches used to say that, trust is gained in teaspoons and lost in buckets. When he was talking about literally with respect to sports, when you make a mistake. And I just thought that always stuck with me, because I was like, that for me is reflective, I think, the human experience. Is there anything else you want to say before we go to the listener questions? Because I think that was Wesley kind of like brought it home with that, his little did a John Wesley almost sermon right there.
Yeah, but I think this is actually a perfect transition to this question from our listener, because it's part of what he's asking is what does it take to be understood as a Christian who's grounded themselves in love, and what kind of affiliation, how do you shift that affiliation in yourself, in your community, all of those things.
Yeah. So we have been getting a number of emails, and if I haven't had a chance to email you back, please know that I will. I have been traveling, been on vacation. I suck at emails anyway, just in general. So just, I got the neurodivergences that contribute to this. But one email that I want to lift up parts of is from a conservative listener. And I'm just honestly delighted that we have a growing number of people who would identify as conservative that can listen to our podcast, because I do think that says something about our ability to hold space for all kinds of people. Because even though we have our critical views of conservative Christianity and mainline, as you heard today, like this is we're equal opportunity critics for self-improvement and growth, not for the sake of just criticizing, but for the sake of making the church
for
better.
Everyone. There is enough snark to go around.
There is
another way of saying it. Yes,
exactly. There is enough snark to go around. I mean, I think that says a lot in a religious landscape that's deeply polarized, right? That we can have this space become something where people find us authentic and feel like, okay, I can even if I don't agree with everything these people say, I trust what they're saying. And they're, so I mean that I just want to, for those of you who identify as moderate or slightly conservative or conservative, just know that I appreciate the fact that you're doing the work listening to this podcast. I do want to say that. So we got an email from a gentleman named Garrett. The title of his email, the subject line was, "You have an ex-MAGA listener." And so as soon as I got this email, this is why this email, because that's the title that made me open it up. Because normally I'd be like, let me scan it and see if I got it. I was like, oh, hey, listen to this, because this is going to be interesting. I recently stumbled across a YouTube podcast. Somehow the YouTube algorithm picked up on my searches about the Guadalupe flood and my interest in Christian theology, which led to a recommended podcast episode I likely never would have discovered otherwise. What started as a curiosity led to many hours of listening. I was genuinely drawn in by the unique dynamic between the four of you. And then he goes on to compliment my co-hosts in amazing, phenomenal ways, because they are amazing and phenomenal co-hosts. So thank you, Garrett,
Garrett.
You said such nice and accurate things about us.
I know. I was like, wow.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett.
He's like a real listener. I was like,
listening for a while.
So yeah. He said that the reason I'm writing is because I wanted to share about things I've personally witnessed and shed light on a phenomenon occurring within my conservative Christian community. I also have a couple of questions at the end that have been lingering with me for a bit. To give some context, I came from an ultra-conservative, white, upper-middle-class Christian household. My dad is diehard MAGA and even ascribed to QAnon when it was still popular, although he's moved on to chemtrails and other wild conspiracies that have caused a rift between us. His viewpoints have been a source of contention to the point that we simply do not talk about anything political or social related. Although I've diverged from my origins quite a bit, which I'll share a bit more below, I still hold traditional Christian beliefs, and so I'm probably not your typical listener. I admit there are core viewpoints, especially when it comes to the Bible, that we likely will never agree on. However, I've reached a point in my faith where I don't get defensive or offended when encountering theological differences. I think this comes from a deeper understanding that God is truly in control, not not in the cliched sense often parroted by Christians after a political loss, but in the highest or in the honest recognition that he doesn't need me to defend him in every circumstance. I just want to pause here, and I'm going to skip a little bit ahead, but I did want to name Blair. I thought this was like, again, going back to your point about stages of faith, like this moral development when you feel like I don't have to, people can have their art, they can have their perspectives and it doesn't demean mine. I was like, oh, this is like, I think it's like stage 4, basically.
I mean, it's like borderline stage 5 where you're like starting to accept that it doesn't all have to go together, that there's going to be tension no matter what you do. Yeah.
Your ability to accept like paradox and the ways in which things aren't always in alignment in the way you want them to be. I thought was really powerful. So basically the email goes on to say, talk about where they live and how they basically have lived in a diverse neighborhood. And they did this intentionally so their kids could have some diversity, and they're excited about that. He goes on to also talk about his current spiritual community and how, again, they will all identify as like white evangelical, and what he has witnessed, and this is where I'll stop to read, which I think has been a helpful and interesting shift. It says, over the last decade, and especially since 2020, I've witnessed more and more conservative Christians, specifically white men, begin to rethink their political alignment. Some are walking away from republicanism altogether. It's not something I've simply heard about. It's something I've seen happening firsthand, and this departure is not simply due to a political loss. It really started before 2020, so I want to differentiate in this phenomenon from some sort of self-preservation in the face of a political hero losing the election. The reason I think it's more than just fair weather fans situation is because of the rejection has grown stronger through the last election cycle. In Los Angeles, this type of transition from conservative to liberal might be more common, but here in the Bible Belt, it seems to be unusual. He goes on to give an example of someone who is a Sunday school teacher, but actually voted Democrat, and how he knows people within his own community who either didn't vote for Trump or voted third party. And he goes on to say, you might be thinking too little, too late, but this is a very hard departure from my upbringing because I was raised being told there's no such thing as a saved Democrat. And I know that shift is necessary if I'm going to love people better. I acknowledge the destructive nature of MAGA's blind loyalty, especially among Christians who consistently excuse or overlook Trump's words, behavior, and claims of faith. That uncritical allegiance, in my view, has done more harm to the witness of the gospel than any political movement in recent history. I've heard numerous liberal Christians online sound alarms to this, and they're right to do so. Well before the last election, I regularly listened to people like Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, and Megyn Kelly. But the more I grew in faith, the more I felt something was off. I would feel unsettled afterward, like I needed to wash my heart. I started seeing, I know, I mean, this was good. I started
so
seeing,
Garrett. We're also impressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's
and touched, like deeply moved.
Yeah, I started seeing it for what it was: hate and idolatry. The realization was part of a broader season of repentance and sobriety. I cut off all news commentary, removed Safari from my phone, and chose to focus on what God has actually placed in front of me: people to love, scripture to study, and work to do. I say most of my Christian friends recognize the overarching problem within the church and are trying to walk a new path. If there's one thing I hope your team takes away from this message, it's that not all literalist or fundamentalist Christians match the cliches often portrayed in some progressive circles. Many of us are being refined. We are trying to grow. We're trying to love better. Wow. So before I read the questions, I just want to say that was really a powerful email. And again, I skimmed some parts of it because it's personal and I don't want to get into his business or put his business in the streets, I should say. But just the commitment to growth and the awareness that I love how they use the word idolatry. Because I mean, that's honestly what it is. And I know it's the second time someone's used it in our review, but I'm like, that's literally the issue. Like that is the issue, is they've made other things their God other than Jesus. And the awareness to call it out for what it is, I think, is what is leading to such growth, which to me is profound. So the question. He says, just as Julia mentioned in one episode that she doesn't personally know any fundamentalist Christians, I don't personally know any progressive Christians or members of the UMC. Could you share your thoughts on Christians like me who hold traditional views on marriage, gender roles, and sexual ethics? More specifically, do you believe someone like me can hold the conservative convictions and still genuinely love someone who is queer? So I'm curious, what do y'all think, or what are your answers to that question? If there's anything else you want to say about the email, feel free. But I wanted to just toss out the question. What do y'all think about his, or any thoughts to answer his question?
Hey, Garrett. Thank you for listening. I read this email so many times because I'm so moved by it and so touched. And like, it's just so beautifully written. And I just appreciate it so much. It occurred to me that like, I don't really have thoughts on Christians that hold those views. The issue for me always comes up against people who try to impose their beliefs onto me. It also occurred to me that we should probably talk about what we do, because the idea, like the concept of sexual ethics to me is really what stood out, because it occurred to me like, oh, I guess if you might assume that like we don't have any, like that I don't have any sexual ethics because like there are like the traditional ones, or there aren't any at all. And like there are like traditional views on marriage, and then maybe like I don't have any views on marriage or any views on gender roles, which isn't true. We can talk about that at another time, but yeah, no shade. Like I don't hold thoughts really, I guess. Like
you don't have negative thoughts, basically, or
yeah,
not
like,
that many thoughts at all, unless they're trying to impose, which I thought was key.
Yeah,
and I'll say more about that. But yeah, go ahead.
If you don't support gay marriage, then don't get gay married. That's
yeah,
fine. I'm not trying to make you be gay married if you don't want to.
I don't think like because I really do think
I don't
like,
want to be gay married. Well, maybe I wish I could be gay married, but
you're straight married right now.
Unfortunately,
Like,
God
think
made
about
me
it.
straight. Yeah.
One at a time.
See, see some traditional marriages one at a time. I mean, I really genuinely and sincerely believe like if it works for you, then do it. I probably have the most traditional views in this room on marriage, in this room.
This digital room.
This digital space. But like for me, the idea of like gender roles, do what you want, but the issue that that harms me is like I know that there have been young girls who have been raised to believe that there are limits on what they can and should do and the way that they should move through the world. I think that conditioning can be harmful and like limiting. But if like, if you're grown and you want to sit at the house or whatever it is and like cater to you like Destiny's Child back in the day, like live.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Julia, and it's the second part of the question that I want to answer specifically is can someone like me can hold conservative convictions and still genuinely love someone who is LGBTQ? What I want to say to you, Garrett, is if that you genuinely in your heart of hearts think that someone who is queer because of who they love and how they express their gender and or is not a beloved child of God and will not meet the redemption that is promised to us all through the work of Christ, then yeah, I have a problem with that. If you don't want to be gay, fine, don't be gay. Like that's between you and God, but like let it be between everybody else and God. Like don't decide for other people. That's just like Julia said, that's my biggest qualm with conservative Christianity.
And I think on the flip side, if your statement that you genuinely love LGBTQ plus people, queer people in your life, that you have relationship with them, then maybe it's an opportunity to abandon your conservative convictions because they fully go against their individual flourishing. So things to consider. I think what struck me from the first question, could you share your thoughts on hold traditional views on marriage, gender roles, and sexual ethics? I think the thing that came to mind for me was like the traditional views on things like sexual ethics are the thing that I hear most about is purity culture and all of the harms that it has done to people and continues to do, not just men, but women as well. And so is there a way to practice a much more traditional sexual ethic that doesn't make people hate their bodies, make them feel like discarded if they choose to have a sexual encounter outside of marriage, that removes all community from them when they do make a decision that is their own? if there's a way to do those things, great. I've yet to see sexual ethics held in fundamental spaces, in evangelical spaces. I've yet to see them not be harmful to people who have chosen to leave that movement or that community. And it's something that sticks with them for years. It's not a couple years and they're good to go. People deal with purity culture, the ramifications of purity culture, for a really long time, in decades, into their marriages. They bring this reality. So if the things that you're holding on to are doing harm to other people, or you come to learn that they're doing harm to other people, maybe there's a way to do it so that it doesn't harm folks. But if there isn't, maybe it's time to let go of those things.
Let it go, let it go. Okay,
that's right. And you sing Frozen. I was gonna say, it makes me wonder. Like, I have a friend whose parents consider themselves to be conservative Christians, but if you were to sit down and you were ask them their values, they actually don't align with any conservative values. And so I also wonder if, like, listen, like, call yourself whatever you want. You self-identify however you self-identify, but I wonder, like, if your values still align as you continue to unpack these things, if you would feel safe and comfortable to even like, perhaps at some point, like, reconsider what you call yourself. Not that it matters, but, like, you know, because even when you say, like, Christians like me who hold these traditional views, I don't even know what that, I can, like, assume what that is, but that could be so many things I don't even really know, you know, like, I don't know that there is, like, a traditional view on, like, a standard traditional view on these things.
I mean, I think this is the rub, and it's the point I want to make, is there aren't, like, I mean, the Catholic Church used to allow priests to be married. Like, people got married before a priest could bless the marriage for hundreds. Like, they just,
polygamy, like, used to be the norm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even within Christianity, I mean, you know what I'm saying? So,
then,
like,
the missionaries were like, no more of that.
Yeah. And so, like, these things are really relatively recent. And Wesley, you're ridiculous.
For the YouTube viewers.
And no, for the YouTube. And I think that the thing that's helpful for us to realize is how these things have always been evolving. Like, these positions have always been evolving. And because of that, it has made it, we should never, the things we think we should hold as traditional, if we do more, like, research, if we do more historical analysis, we see that this position has, again, changed and evolved. It's the way we talked about salvation was a perfect example of how that belief, the traditional belief of salvation, has evolved since the time of Christ. And the other thing I say with respect to these questions is, I think you look at Jesus, right? I mean, Jesus did not hold traditional views on marriage. Jesus did not hold traditional views on gender, sexuality, or sexual. I mean, Jesus bucked the trend on all these things. And so, what does it say about the person who we claim to follow, that they were willing to break with tradition and for the sake of love, to call people into community so that they could see God in themselves, in the unwillingness that we find people who call themselves Christ followers do that today? I think, to me, is a disservice to the Jesus that I read in the scripture, to not take his example seriously, and to instead look at those 7 verses or things that Paul says or whatever. I think learning to read scripture in a way that is good exegesis will help you understand what Jesus is talking about, what Paul's talking about, a lot of these other passages that can help us grow. And quite honestly, I'll end with this, and we can wrap up. To an extent, I agree with you, Julia. I think that I wish there was more accurate terms for how people could define themselves, people like Garrett. Because, yeah, I mean, call yourself what you want to, but that term, you're maturing in a different way. And what that's going to be for you, I don't know. I don't know. I don't always feel right with the moniker Christian either. As I've said, I call myself, I think I'm more close in line with follower of the religion of Jesus that is more accurately to how I understand myself. So, well, thank y'all for answering the question. Thank you for listening to the Progressive Christians podcast, which is a ministry, or the Progressive Christian podcast is a ministry of The Loft, a worship community of West William Methodist Church. If you would like to connect with us and be a part of the conversation, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok and all other social media platforms, and YouTube at The Progressive Christians. Our show is mixed and edited by our wonderful audio engineer, AJ. And again, we want to invite you to rate, review, share, and subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us and let us know. We love engaging our listeners. We love really learning from you all. Thank you for the comments you're sending or pasting and posting and what you're sending. It truly is amazing, and we are excited for the community that we are continuing to build. And we will see y'all next time. Bye.
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 Bye.